Welcome back to The Trek. I'm Molly.
And my name is Danny, and today we're going to be talking to you about through hiking as a couple.
So we've done 2 through hikes as a couple, and yeah, it's definitely hard, but it's totally worth it and really fun to do a trail as a team. And so we're going to start talking about, first of all, what it's like to prep for a through hike as a couple.
So before going on a prolonged through hike, we really recommend going out on a day hike and seeing what your pacing is like, seeing your stride length, how much you're comfortable doing in a day. Is there someone that does less? Is there someone that does more? That's really important.
And not just a day hike, like go on a backpacking trip. We did, I think, 2 hikes together, like one overnight and one 3-day trip beforehand to really understand each other's pace and how to do it. Also, a really important thing to do, not just as a couple, but also individually, is to test out the gear that you're going to be using.
Yeah.
So we shared a lot of gear, and being able to test that out before getting on trail definitely helped us out.
So let's talk a little more about gear. Before starting our first through hike, we actually went out and bought only one cook pot and stove, and we were planning on sharing it, and we did for the first week, but quickly realized that that actually wasn't going to work out for us.
Yeah, we quickly learned that I like to eat at different times than you do, and trying to wait for water to boil if we were doing 2 separate meals definitely was not for us. I mean, some couples have the same food, have the same meals, and share it that way, but we learned that that just didn't work for us.
And again, that's why it's really important to go out on backpacking trips before starting a through hike.
So we actually hiked with 2 cook pots and 2 stoves. I know that might be sacrilegious to the ultralight people out there, but it just worked better for us. So another big piece of gear that we shared was our tent. We had a Big Agnes Tiger Wall UL3, so we had a 3-person tent. And so what we do is one person would carry the rainfly, one person would carry the tent, one person would carry the tent poles, and one would carry the stakes. And that wasn't exactly split evenly,
It worked out fine.
It worked for us.
And to go off of that, we actually used a 3-person tent instead of a 2-person tent. And again, sacrilegious to the ultralight community, but as a couple living in a tent for 6 months, it is nice to have that extra space to be able to just kind of like sprawl out at night. It was worth the extra ounces, and we recommend a 3-person tent.
I saw plenty of people with 2-person tents out there that they were sharing, but just personal preference for us.
Rock on to them. So next up, and probably the most important, is communication.
Yeah.
Figuring out as a couple if you are going to be attached at the hip and hiking the entire trail together, or if you're more comfortable hiking apart and meeting up at different times of the day, that is going to make or break your hike.
Yeah, so on the AT, we hiked together pretty much all day, every day. But then when we were on the PCT, there were times where we would spend the entire morning apart. And that worked great. There's no real pro or con to both. Like, it's just whatever you want to do.
So key communication points in the morning of saying how much you're doing that day, where you're meeting up for lunch, just kind of like ways to communicate and how to get in touch with each other. Those are really important.
So one of the things that worked really well for us on the PCT was to hike apart the first half of the day, because I didn't do really well in the heat and Dan was okay. So I'd wake up super early and take off, and we really needed to know where we were having lunch that day, so I didn't go too far and he could catch up to me.
I would pretty much just run to her.
Another big thing that we really needed to communicate on trail was how long the stretch was going to be. So if you had X amount of miles to do, how many days was it going to take you?
And also, when you get into town, are you Neroing into town? Are you zeroing into town? There were so many times where I didn't communicate the fact that I wanted to take a day off, and I would just pout walking out of town. So definitely communicate that with your partner.
You want to make sure you're both happy leaving town.
Yes. Next up, you need to communicate your hygiene tolerance with your partner, especially if you're sharing a tent with them. Stuff like, what are you including in your toiletry bag? How often are you cleaning your clothes? How often are you showering? Those are really important to communicate with your partner.
Yeah, you really want to make sure you're on the same page. And if you just want to say goodbye to all of it, go ahead and do that. But if one of you isn't comfortable, make sure to communicate that.
But also at the end of the day, if you're through hiking a long distance trail, everyone's gonna smell and you'll get used to it.
So something you really don't have to think about when you're hiking alone is if you wake up and you're having a rough day, you just cut your miles short whenever you want to. But when you're hiking as a couple, it's important to communicate to each other. If you wake up and you're not feeling it or you're hurting that day, make sure you let your partner know, because they're there to support you. You don't want to do more than you feel comfortable doing.
And keep in mind, if they get injured, then what do you do?
It's also important so the other person doesn't get frustrated. If you're not communicating and someone's going slower and you get kind of pissed off at them, like maybe there's something else going on. So make sure you're communicating, asking how they're doing, and adjusting day to day to make sure you're both having a great time out there.
Something that worked for us on trail that made trail life as seamless as possible is delegating up tasks in town and in camp. So we'll start in town. I would figure out accommodation, I would figure out resupply, the laundromats. Molly would go and figure out shuttles, how we're getting into town, how we're getting out of town. That really helps just create less stress for town day.
Yeah, like one of the things that we found really useful was if someone wanted to stay with the laundromat, the other person could go grab resupply or grab takeout food. So that way you weren't wasting your whole town day running around doing tasks.
2 people are better than 1.
So some of those town tasks kind of bleed into on trail. A lot of times you're looking at where you want to stay if you're worried about being able to grab a spot, and you're also trying to plan your shuttle for when you get to the trailhead. So if you have one person each doing both of those tasks, it definitely alleviates that like need to focus on town while you're on trail, which you don't want to do. Then there's also in camp. So something that we would do on the AT especially was one of us would go hang the bear bag and one of us would go set up the tent. Or in the mornings, one of you would break down camp while you're boiling coffee, the other person is. So there's definitely ways to split up those tasks to help speed up camp chores.
So I think that just about wraps up our thoughts on how to thru hike as a couple. We hope you found some of these ideas helpful for you.
Yeah, if you're a couple that's thinking about thru hiking and you have more questions, drop them down in the comments below. And if you're a couple that's thru hiked, drop your tips below. There's always such a wealth of knowledge out there, and we want to share it with everybody.
Yeah, and definitely stay tuned for our next video. We have some exciting content coming up.
Make sure you like and subscribe.
Yeah, bye guys.